Do you really think your uncle's fishing tales are over the top? Sweetheart History has penned the ultimate handbook of nonsense, and it's a top seller. We are about to reveal 33 scams so incredibly outrageous that they didn't just deceive a handful of gullible souls. They had monarchs, scholars, and entire nations participating in the conga of credulity. Prepare yourself to reconsider everything you believed about human reason. Today we honor the spectacularly astonishing foolishness of yesteryears. This is not merely history. It resembles a delightful comedy of mistakes accompanied by a significant deficit of common sense. 1. In England during 1726, a woman named Mary Toft declared she was giving birth to, brace yourself rabbits, not those adorable chocolate ones but real fluffy twitchy-nosed bunnies. And what did the physicians do? Did they summon the men in white coats? Absolutely not. They seized their notepads buzzing with anticipation. To keep the fun going, please subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. One royal surgeon was practically beside himself, proclaiming it a miracle. For several weeks, Mary functioned as a genuine rabbit factory, dispensing bits and pieces of rabbit as if she were a furry confetti cannon. The secret to this astounding interspecies event. Let's just say Mary had an exceptionally accommodating chamber and a friend with a rabbit obsession. When a man was caught sneaking a tiny bunny into her quarters, the whole fluffy facade vanished, Mary confessed. The medical mastermind suddenly recalled they had other patients to attend to, while the world collectively facepalmed. Seriously, how can an entire medical field be duped like that? 2. In New York, 1869, a few men were excavating a well, and bam! They discovered a 10-foot stone figure, a fossilized giant. America collectively lost its mind. Was it evidence from the Bible? Was it Bigfoot's ancestor? The farmer, Stub Newell, quickly transformed his land into a theme park, replete with entrance fees. Even P.T. Barnum, the king of "Is this real or did I have a hallucination?" sought to cash in on the giant craze. The punchline. It was merely a large rock sculpted by a crafty con artist named George Hull, who planned to prank the devout and of course get obscenely wealthy. It wasn't even an impressive statue. Picture a misshapen stone potato with anger issues, yet crowds lined up for miles, demonstrating that if you craft a tale with sufficient flair, people will gladly pay to buy into an exceptionally foolish rock. 3. Let's leap to 1835. The New York Sun newspaper decided reality was dull and cranked the fiction dial all the way up. They announced that leading astronomer Sir John Herschel had uncovered life on the moon, and not just something as mundane as space moss. We are talking about bat-winged humanoids, unicorns frolicking near sapphire temples, and beavers who were apparently expert architects with a taste for lunar real estate. The articles, which were supposedly credible science, spoiler alert, they were not, were filled with such absurd details that people bought into it completely. The Sun's sales skyrocketed. Rival publications, choking on their own journalistic integrity, began reprinting the lunar absurdity. Meanwhile, poor Herschel, who was actually in South Africa tending to his own astronomical affairs, was likely bemused as to why everyone suddenly believed he was buddies with moon dwellers. The Sun, on the other hand, simply shrugged, having already clinched the championship of 19th century clickbait. 4. And here arrives P.T. Barnum, a man whose motto essentially was, "Why let facts interfere with a captivating story or a pile of money?" In the 1,840 seconds, he introduced us to the Fiji mermaid. Imagine the upper half of a monkey stitched onto a fish's tail and left in an attic to mummify into pure terror. That was this so-called scientific marvel. Barnum showcased it as undeniable evidence of merfolk, and the public, bless their unsuspecting hearts, went utterly wild. Newspapers blared, "Mermaid confirmed," while more discerning individuals probably wondered why it appeared to be so profoundly melancholic. Naturally, it was a complete hoax, likely pieced together by some bored fisherman with a warped sense of humor. But it drew crowds. People paid. Humanity stared deep into the void. And there it was, a monkey head emitting a faint scent of desperation and aged fish. 5. England, 1917. Two young cousins, Elsie and Francis, exclaimed, "Hey world, fairies are real, and we've got photographs to back it up." The images depicted them hanging out with tiny winged creatures that bore a striking resemblance to poorly cut-out magazine snapshots, propped up with pins, although details. The world, including Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Yes, The gentleman who created Sherlock Holmes fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker. Doyle, a great enthusiast of all things supernatural, essentially became their public relations manager. For many decades, these coding sprites served as the enigmatic figures of their era. It wasn't until the cousins had nearly turned to dust themselves that they finally shared the story. Indeed, it was cardboard. Our mistake. Doyle was likely still in heated debate with their apparitions about the genuineness of it all. Sometimes you just really wish to have faith in those sparkly little beings, even if they are undeniably flat. 6. Allow me to introduce John Keeley, a delightful character from Philadelphia during the late 1800s who claimed he had created a machine that operated on well enchantment. In essence, he named it the Keeley motor, energized by etheric vibrations. In simpler terms, he most certainly fabricated it. Investors, perhaps after inhaling one too many ether fumes, threw money at him as if he were distributing adorable puppies for free. His exhibitions were sheer spectacle, machines buzzing, objects levitating, all devoid of any visible power source. The secret? His laboratory resembled a complex Rube Goldberg device of concealed pipes, secret air compressors, and plausibly a very exhausted hamster on a wheel. Ask to peer inside. Heavens no! You might disturb the cosmic energies, he would exclaim. After he passed away, they discovered his marvelous engine was merely a ridiculously expensive and intricate deception. The singular thing he consistently produced was pure, unfiltered nonsense. October 30th, 1938. Orson Welles and his radio crew set out to give America a collective shock. They adapted H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds into a series of urgent news bulletins. Martians invading New Jersey. Heat rays incinerating everything in sight. Complete chaos. For anyone who missed the initial message saying, "Hey, this is merely a play, folks," it was the actual, literal end of the world. Reports suggest that people fled in panic, burdening telephone lines, pleading for assistance, and likely making some very dubious bargains with their creator. While some argue that the widespread fear was exaggerated by newspapers that enjoyed a good fright as much as Wells did, it's undeniable that it sent shockwaves of dread rippling across the nation. It demonstrated that radio could convince you that doom was just around the corner, even if it was simply actors enjoying themselves in a studio. And we complain about deceptive news nowadays. How quaint. 8. In 1912, an amateur fossil enthusiast named Charles Dawson discovered the Piltdown Man in England. The mythical Holy Grail, the crucial missing link. It possessed a rather human-like brain and an ape-like jaw, exactly what British science ordered to showcase their status as the cradle of humanity. For 40 glorious years, this figure was the superstar of evolution. Textbooks swooned, museums longed to display it. The only minuscule, insignificant issue was that it was an entirely fabricated hoax. A medieval human skullcap carefully glued to the jaw of an orangutan, complete with reshaped teeth and an antiquated chemical stain. It took until 1953 for the scientific community to finally go, "Hold on a second. This jaw truly favors bananas." Piltdown Man, demonstrating that if one wants to believe something hard enough, they will blissfully overlook the primates screaming at them. 9. Picture this scenario. 1817 in rural England. A mysterious woman wanders into town babbling a language that no one comprehends, dressed as though she just escaped from a bizarre costume party. She claims to be Princess Caribou from the exotic, never-before-heard-of island of Javasu, abducted by pirates. The local elite, feeling rather bored, lapped up her tale with great enthusiasm. They fed her, clothed her, and hung on to every fabricated word she uttered. For weeks, she was the toast of the eccentric social scene. Then, plot twist. Someone acknowledged her. Mary Wilcox, the daughter of a cobbler known for her flair for the dramatic and an aversion to dullness. She had fabricated the entire story. Language background, royal demeanor. And did they drive her away from town? Not at all. She became even more renowned. A true testament to the impact of a good story and a great deal of audacity. 10. Oh, the Louvre. So lavish, so cultured, so credulous. In 1896, they spent a fortune on a remarkable gold tiara claimed to have belonged to an ancient Scythian king named Sitaparnis. It was adorned with gold, embellished with grand battle scenes, essentially the most dazzling headwear from 300 B.C. For years, it dazzled the museum's visitors. Then some killjoy specialists began to murmur about suspiciously contemporary tool markings. The real surprise came when a modest goldsmith from Odessa, Israel Ruchimovsky, finally stepped forward and said, Excuse me, esteemed museum personnel. I crafted that as a gift for a friend. Oops. He even offered to demonstrate by recreating a piece. The Louvre tried to dismiss the revelation, but indeed, their invaluable antique was a stunning yet remarkably recent forgery. The silence within those revered halls must have been utterly deafening. Shinichi Fujimura, known as God's Hand, due to his theatrical moniker in Japan, was an archaeological sensation for years. This individual possessed an uncanny talent for unearthing remarkably ancient artifacts, shifting the timeline of Japanese history by hundreds of thousands of years. He would emphatically extract Stone Age tools from the earth, cameras flashing and scholars gasping in astonishment. What a brilliant mind! What instinct! It turns out his extraordinary instinct involved sneaking onto excavation sites the previous night, burying the artifacts himself, and then dramatically discovering them the following day. He was in essence the archaeological equivalent of a magician concealing a rabbit in a hat, except his hat encompassed the entire historical record of the nation. When a newspaper sting operation caught him in the act, literally burying his so-called discoveries, his celestial reputation crumbled faster than a prehistorical biscuit. Japan's oldest artifacts ended up being as ancient as his shovel. Oh, to have been a fly on the wall during the dreadnought prank of 1910. A group of playful British aristocrats, including a young Virginia Woolf. Yes, that very Virginia Woolf thought it would be absolutely hysterical to deceive the Royal Navy. So they applied theatrical makeup, donned elaborate robes, and presented themselves as the Emperor of Abyssinia with his entourage. And the Navy. They graciously rolled out the red carpet. Bestowed full honors, they were granted a guided tour of the flagship, the HMS Dreadnought, the most formidable warship in existence at that time. The Abyssinians spoke a perplexing mixture of Latin and nonsensical phrases like "bangaba banga," and the officers nodded sagely, presumably believing it was ancient royal etiquette. Once the hoax was unveiled, the Navy was left in sheer embarrassment. Parliament erupted in laughter, and Virginia Woolf likely gathered some brilliant material for a novel about the absurdity of power. In the 1970s, the world was captivated by the revelation of the Takade tribe in the Philippines. A Stone Age community living in complete isolation and untouched by modern society. They adorned themselves with leaves, utilized stone tools, and communicated in a distinct dialect. Anthropologists wept tears of joy. National Geographic featured them prominently. It was akin to discovering a living, breathing time capsule, except it was not. Years later, skeptical journalists revisited the area unexpectedly and found the tribe wearing jeans, listening to radios, and generally bearing no resemblance to a Stone Age existence at all. It turned out the entire spectacle was likely orchestrated by a well-connected Filipino politician seeking fame, fortune, and possibly to safeguard the land from logging. The noble primitives were in reality just ordinary people who had been convinced to don costumes for the cameras. Talk about a reality show mishap before the genre even existed. Ah, Nessie. The Loch Ness Monster. The ultimate is it real, or is my auntie just a bit tipsy again? Cryptozoological phenomenon. The most renowned proof for decades was the surgeon's photograph from 1934, revealing that iconic long-necked silhouette emerging from the murky waters. It was blurry. It was enigmatic. It was entirely fabricated. It turns out it was staged by a disgruntled big-game hunter, Marmaduke Weather, who felt humiliated after a previous Nessie claim of his was exposed as merely the foot of a hippo. Yes, truly. He and his accomplices crafted the monster from a toy submarine and some molded putty. One of the hoaxers admitted to the deception on his deathbed decades later. But by that time, Nessie had already become a global icon. The photo, whether debunked or not, cemented the legend, revealing that people yearn to believe in monsters, especially when a good grainy photograph is involved. The donation of Constantine was a document that essentially granted the Pope a free pass for ruling most of Western Europe. Allegedly penned by Emperor Constantine himself in the 4th century, it conferred vast temporal power to the papacy. For centuries, it served as the Catholic Church's ultimate trump card during political disputes. If anyone questioned their authority, Constantine purportedly declared, "However, there was just one minuscule little issue. It was a forgery, and not even a particularly convincing one. Scholars later observed that the Latin was somewhat overly 8th century. Imagine discovering a Roman scroll that mentions yeet or no cap. It was so evidently fabricated by someone centuries later to bolster the papal claims. It's almost delightful in its boldness. The Vatican somewhat coughed and merely shifted the focus for several centuries when it faced exposure. Whoops. Num. Theodore Hook, a British prankster from the 19th century with far too much leisure time, made a wager in 1810 that he could turn any residence in London into the most discussed location within just one day. His target was 54 Berners Street. His technique, unbridled chaos. He dispatched thousands of letters under various forged names requesting deliveries, services, and visits. We're talking coachloads of dignitaries, numerous pianos, cartloads of coal, wedding cakes, doctors, lawyers, priests, and even the Lord Mayor of London himself. The street transformed into a scene of complete pandemonium, utterly gridlocked for hours. Meanwhile, Hook observed the magnificent chaos unfold from a rented room across the street, likely chuckling into his cup of tea. He prevailed in the wager and also secured a spot in the chronicles of the most epic pranks ever executed by someone who clearly needed a more fulfilling pastime. Num. William Henry Ireland was a teenage literary forger with ambitions far exceeding his abilities. In the 1,790 seconds believing the world required additional Shakespeare debatable, he began discovering lost manuscripts, letters, and even an entirely new play by the bard supposedly uncovered from an ancient trunk. Literary London went into a frenzy. Experts validated them. The new play, Vortigern and Rowena, was even performed. The only problem? It was atrocious, akin to fan fiction penned by a brooding goth individual, truly terrible. During its debut, the audience erupted in laughter at the dreadful lines, necessitating a halt to the performance. Ireland ultimately confessed, anticipating applause for his cleverness. Instead, he faced mockery. Nonetheless, for a brief moment, he had the entire literary community convinced that Shakespeare occasionally wrote like a complete hack. Bravo, kid. Sort of. Num. For several decades, elaborate crop circles emerging overnight in English fields puzzled scientists, sparked countless UFO theories, and likely gave a few farmers quite a scare. Were they messages from extraterrestrials, mysterious energy whirlpools, the handiwork of exceptionally clever badgers? In 1991, two cheerful fellows stepped forward and declared, "Nah mates, it was us," with some planks rope and a healthy dose of sneaky late-night stomping. They had been pulling off the prank since the 70s purely for amusement. The paranormal experts were devastated. The ufologists lamented. Government cover-up. Doug and Dave simply shrugged, probably over a pint, having executed one of the longest-lasting, most widespread pranks in history. All driven by boredom and a wicked sense of humor. Honestly, it's legendary. Num. The 1990s were a wild era for alien enthusiasts, especially after the alien autopsy footage made its way onto television. This grainy, allegedly top-secret film depicted scientists dissecting a very deceased, very gray, very E.T.-like creature retrieved from the notorious Roswell crash. It was sensational. It was horrifying. It was a guy in a rubber suit stuffed with offal from a local butcher. Ray Santilli, the promoter of the film, amassed a fortune. Years later, he confessed it was a reconstruction featuring only a few frames of original and equally dubious footage. The special effects artist responsible for creating the alien even came forward. However, the damage had already been done. For a generation, that shaky footage of an entirely fake alien undergoing gut examination was evidence that we were not alone and that aliens evidently possessed really poor skin. Num. Professor Johann Behringer was an 18th century German scholar, passionate about fossils and seemingly possessed a complete lack of skepticism. He began unearthing remarkable figured stones, Lugenstein or lying stones, from a nearby mountain. These weren't just any fossils, they depicted lizards, birds, spiders, even comets, and Hebrew letters. Behringer was overjoyed. He was rewriting natural history. He even published an extravagant book about his discoveries. The tragic comic twist: his envious academic rivals had crafted and hidden the stones to humiliate him. They even inscribed his own name on some of them in Hebrew, which you'd think might have raised a red flag. Bieringer, bless his devoted heart, initially brushed aside rumors of a hoax, but eventually the evidence became overwhelmingly convincing. He was said to have spent his entire fortune attempting to reclaim all copies of his now infamous book, Academic Trolling, 18th century style, brutal, yet indisputably effective. Num. P.T. Barnum, a man capable of selling sand in the Sahara, struck gold once more in 1835 with Joyce Heth. Who was Joyce Heth? Only the 161-year-old former nurse of George Washington. Naturally, Barnum showcased this delicate, blind, and largely incapacitated elderly African-American woman who would mesmerize audiences with dramatically embellished stories about young George. Was she genuinely 161 years old? Did she truly change the first president's diapers? Spoiler alert, no, she did not. Following her passing, a public autopsy. Because Barnum was never one to miss an opportunity for spectacle, even with a corpse revealed that she was probably no more than 80 years of age. Barnum, always the showman, framed it as yet another layer of intrigue, demonstrating that his audience wasn't just eager to be deceived. They practically pleaded for it. Thus, the American entertainment industry emerged, perhaps rooted in a fib concerning a very old woman. Clifford Irving was a novelist with an ego as large as Texas. In the early 1970s, he convinced McGraw-Hill, a prominent publishing house, that he was secretly collaborating on the autobiography of Howard Hughes, the eccentric, reclusive billionaire who hadn't been spotted in public for years. Irving concocted letters, forged signatures, and even held interviews with Hughes. Or rather, he conversed with himself in a comical voice. He secured a substantial advance, earned a Time magazine cover, the full works. It was the literary sensation of the century until Howard Hughes, from whatever germ-free hideout he occupied, surfaced just long enough to hold a telephone press conference and assert, "I don't know this Irving fellow from Adam." Irving's elaborate house of cards crumbled, resulting in his incarceration. However, one must admit, for a brief moment, he was living the dream, fabricating tales one anecdote at a time. The Travels of Sir John Mandeville, a book that emerged in the 14th century, was essentially the medieval counterpart of a wildly adventurous travel blog. This Sir John purported to have journeyed to the Earth's farthest reaches, encountering one-eyed giants, two-headed men, realms where jewels grew on trees, and individuals who communicated solely through flatulence. Alright, perhaps not the last one, but something close. For centuries, it was regarded as a legitimate travelogue cited by scholars and inspiring explorers like Columbus. The minor detail, Sir John Mandeville likely never existed, and the book was a magnificent concoction of existing myths, legends, and outright fabrications, possibly authored by a bored cleric with an incredibly vivid imagination. It represented the ultimate armchair adventure, demonstrating that even in the Middle Ages, people adored a riveting tale about a place they would never actually visit. Ah, the Hitler Diaries. In 1983, the German magazine Stern unleashed a bombshell. They had obtained the Führer's secret personal diaries, 60 volumes of private reflections, doodles of tanks, and likely grievances about his wallpaper. They paid millions for this find. Historians were thrilled. It was the historical discovery of a lifetime until, oh dear. Experts swiftly pointed out that the paper was too contemporary, the ink was incorrect. The bindings were post-war, and Hitler's signature appeared to have been forged by a particularly clumsy spider. The diaries were the creation of Konrad Kuja, a prolific forger of Nazi memorabilia, skilled at mimicking handwriting and even more adept at deceiving people. The Stern editors were left embarrassed and burdened with a costly pile of counterfeit angst. A stark reminder to always inspect the stationery before proclaiming something a historical artifact. Operation Mincemeat during World War II was a scheme so audacious, so brilliantly grotesque it seems plucked from a spy novel conceived in a particularly wild dream. The British aimed to convince the Nazis that the Allies would invade Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily. Their tactic? Acquire a corpse, dress him as a Royal Marine officer, attach a briefcase filled with fake, top-secret invasion plans to his wrist, and discard him off the Spanish coast, where pro-German officials would stumble upon him. They even devised a backstory for Major William Martin, complete with love letters and overdue bills in his pockets. Remarkably, it worked. The Nazis swallowed the bait hook, line, and sinker, redirecting troops away from Sicily. A deceased body, some forged documents, and an abundance of British perseverance undoubtedly altered the course of the war. You can't invent this stuff. Well, they did, and it was ingenious. For decades, Anna Anderson enthralled the world with her assertion. She was Anastasia Romanov, the youngest daughter of the last Tsar of Russia. Miraculously rescued from the Bolshevik execution squad, she possessed the eyes, the demeanor, and the tragic essence, persuading former courtiers of the Romanov dynasty distant kin and a wave of romantic dreamers eager to believe in her miraculous survival story. Legal disputes extended for many years as she pursued acknowledgement and a portion of the non-existent Romanov wealth. This saga was straight out of a Russian novel. Then in the 1990 seconds DNA analysis emerged. The outcome determined not Anastasia. She was most likely Franziska Szankowska, a Polish factory worker with a background of mental health issues. Yet for over 60 years, she lived the ultimate life of an imposter, demonstrating that if your tale is tragic enough and your gaze is compelling enough, people will alter history on your behalf. 27. Edgar Allan Poe, a master of the eerie and an eccentric literary figure, declared in 1844 that journalism required a significant shakeup. He therefore published a piece in the New York Sun, presenting a factual report on the astonishing three-day journey across the Atlantic Ocean by a steering balloon named Victoria, piloted by the renowned aeronaut Monk Mason. The article brimmed with precise, yet entirely fictitious technical details, dramatic narratives of the expedition, and even a list of passengers. New Yorkers went wild. The news spread quickly. People celebrated this extraordinary accomplishment. Then a few days later, the Sun awkwardly confessed it was all a fabrication, crafted by Poe for amusement and likely to enhance his sales. Poe was a forerunner of fake news long before it became mainstream. And you thought your Twitter timeline was misleading. 28. During the 1930s, a man named Howard Horn stumbled upon a treasure trove of historical documents in Pennsylvania, famously known as the Horn Papers. These journals, maps, and letters supposedly provided a comprehensive and detailed depiction of early pioneer life in the area that was previously unrecorded. Historians were ecstatic. It was a veritable goldmine of information. Except it wasn't. Horn, it turned out, had an imaginative mind and a gift for creative writing. He had fabricated the entire collection, even claiming to have discovered the lead box containing them after a dream conveniently instructed him on where to dig. It required years for scholars to carefully dismantle the authenticity of the papers, highlighting anachronistic elements and inconsistencies. Horn, up until his death, maintained that he was merely a vessel for historical truth, not a forger. Sure, Howard, and I'm the Queen of Sheba. 29. In the 1970s, thousands of peculiar clay figurines were uncovered in Camboro, Mexico. Tiny sculptures depicted humans riding dinosaurs, much like medieval knights on T-Rex mounts. Creationists shouted, "See, humans coexisted with dinosaurs." Scientists countered, "No." The figures were clearly modern, likely crafted in someone's backyard pottery class. Nonetheless, fringe theorists continued to include them in documentaries, books, and debates in online forums. If Jurassic Park were real, these individuals would have sued Spielberg for infringement on copyright. 30. Ever heard of the English Mercury? It was long proclaimed to be the very first English newspaper, supposedly launched in 1588 to report on the victory over the Spanish Armada. Fresh off the press, read all about it. Historians referenced it. Textbooks featured it. What a landmark for journalism. Except it was as phony as a $3 bill. The entire publication was actually a literary hoax devised in the 18th century by an antiquarian and his associates, probably fueled by a few too many glasses of port. They painstakingly designed it to appear and sound genuine just for amusement, tricking their fellow academics. It took an unexpectedly long time for anyone to notice the suspiciously contemporary typeface and the reality that printing just didn't function quite like that in 1588. Therefore, the oldest newspaper was merely a result of highly clever, very old-school trolling. 31. The Amityville Horror. Oh dear. In 1975, the Lutz family abandoned their new residence in Amityville, New York, after a mere 28 days claiming the house was inhabited by demonic forces. Green slime seeping from walls, swarms of flies in winter, eerie voices, and a demonic pig named Jody. The narrative became a best-selling book and birthed a blockbuster movie series. It was chilling. It was predominantly an elaborate hoax. Investigations and subsequent confessions revealed that many of the supernatural occurrences were drastically exaggerated or entirely fabricated by the Lutzes, perhaps with assistance from their attorney who recognized a lucrative opportunity. While it is indeed a tragic story, there had been a mass murder at the residence prior, and the ensuing haunting tale was largely staged. The true horror lies in the fact that millions of dollars were earned by terrifying individuals with a narrative that was more imaginative than factual. 32. Friederike Hofe, the Seeress of Prever, was a German woman from the 19th century who became a phenomenon due to her alleged supernatural powers. Bedridden by illness, she claimed to connect with spirits, forecast the future, peer into individuals' souls, and even converse in a mesmerizing inner language filled with strange symbols and sounds. Doctors, poets, and philosophers flocked to experience her abilities. She would enter trances, share visions, and generally put on an impressive performance. Was she a true mystic, or merely an overly imaginative, possibly hysterical woman skilled at captivating an audience? While her supporters believed in her divine link, modern skeptics argue that a potent mix of illness, suggestion, and a splash of theatrics was likely at play. Essentially, she was the 19th century's version of an exceptionally convincing psychic hotline operator, albeit with more fainting episodes. 33. And at last, a contemporary classic proving we have yet to learn the Pacific Northwest tree octopus. In 1998, a website surfaced showcasing this astonishing endangered species, Octopus paxarbalis, an amphibious octopus inhabiting the temperate rainforests of Washington state, purportedly swings through trees using its tentacles. This site included photographs, clearly altered scientific details, and urgent conservation appeals. Its creation served as a test for media literacy. And guess what? People wholeheartedly bought into it. Educators reported that students wrote passionate essays advocating for the protection of the unfortunate tree octopus. It became a quintessential example of online naivety, because, let's be honest, an octopus in a tree is just believable enough if you truly want it to be. Kudos to the internet and to humanity's remarkable ability to believe anything if it's accompanied by text and an image. So, after 33 hoaxes, one question lingers: were people merely incredibly gullible, or do we continue to fall for the same tricks today? Albeit with improved lighting and internet connectivity. Which of these hoaxes do you think was the most mind-numbingly ridiculous or outright brilliant? And better yet, what modern hoax do you believe future historians will find as amusing as we do now? Share your craziest thoughts in the comments. I'm looking forward to reading all of them. If this video made you chuckle, gasp, or reconsider the last 5 centuries of human choices, please hit the like button, share it with fellow enthusiasts, and remember to subscribe, activate notifications so you won't miss the next video. We have a plethora of absurd historical events ready for you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.